Welcome to episode 65. I've got a great guest. I've got Kris Wilder here, but I will first do the shout out as always. This one goes to Kenneth Knight. Kenneth has been one of my patrons for a few years now. So I want to say thank you, Kenneth. It's thanks to you and all my other patrons that I can do the podcast and all the other stuff that I do. So folks, go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere or go to wimsblog.com/donate. And then you can help make even more possible, right? Before we get started, because we've got a great conversation ahead, all the stuff that we mentioned today will be at wimsblog.com/65, number 65. I'll put all the links that Kris and I discuss over there so you can check it out. All right, Kris Wilder, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Outstanding, sir.
All right. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording.
Yeah, we had to get the juices going there. Yeah.
So Kris is going to try to derail the podcast and my questions as much as possible, so you're warned. And I think that despite that, it's still going to be awesome. So everybody listening, you know what's coming next. So Kris, you and I met, I think, about 15 years ago at Mark's barbecue.
And I got a story to tell about that.
Ooh. Okay, you go.
For people who don't know what the animal barbecue is, it's Mark Animal McYoung opens up his home. It's an invitation. It's a barbecue. It goes on for about 3 days. No belts, no ranks, no weapons. Leave everything on the sidewalk, and then you come in. And you find an extraordinarily diverse group of people there. And I mean, you have criminals and law enforcement standing next to each other, and it's just very different. But one of the things that he has is he has this pit that's filled full of sawdust, and you can go over there and you can roll anytime you want. So I see Wim heading over there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go try my hand over there. So I go over there, and Wim and I start going at it. And I'm having a pretty good time. And by the way, it's not super intense. It's just it's just guys playing around.
It's friendly.
It's friendly.
Yeah.
And we're going at it. And I will say this, that you bested me that day, but my ego demands that I reveal I had an infected foot that day, and I was not at my best. So I had to say that in there. But yeah, that's where we met,
Kris.
Yeah, that's where we met.
I mean, if you had a normally functioning foot, I'd be on my ass like in a second.
It would have helped if you'd worn a judo gi, because I worked with the collar really well, and there was no collar to work, just a t-shirt, and it's like, nah, that's not helpful.
No, the way I remember it, I mean, you gave a pretty good accounting of yourself, to put it mildly. It wasn't like I was having an easy day at the office, so to speak. So I mean, don't sell yourself short.
Well, you're gracious, my friend. You're gracious. So, but yeah, that's where we met. We met at Mark's barbecue. Yeah.
Yep.
And then of course we have more common friends like Lauren Christensen and so forth, and so it was like, hey, I know you, yeah, and you're like, I know you too, but we don't. Now we do, so let's go roll. And that's a great thing too, is that when you cross hands and you get a chance to roll with somebody, you get to know them more than you would in a conversation.
Yeah,
you just know who they are.
Yeah. And this is one of the great things about a barbecue, and I'm really sad that I haven't been able to go for a long time. But like you said, there's people there who are, who've been on the wrong side of the tracks, and then you've got people from all kinds of law enforcement agencies, former and active, that are there. Everybody's getting along, and I think one of the big reasons for that is that nobody wants to start anything. Because however good you may be, there is bound to be at least a few guys who are equally good, if not better. And even if you're top of the heap, there's like a few dozen people who will come at you that you won't be able to take them all out at once. No. So there's no incentive to show off, to be, this arrogant guy who wants to show everybody.
You will not last.
No, it's not going to happen. And not that, there'd be fights all over the yard or anything, just that the vibes are very different. That you don't even want to act like that. It's like, wow, that guy's over here and that guy's over there. And there's that guy, wow, okay, he can do all that stuff that I can't. And then it's just,
Yeah.
sharing and learning and training together, having a good time. And go ahead.
Do you remember the hostage situation at the hotel?
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't
Yeah,
there, but yeah.
yeah. The thing of it was one of the hotels where people were staying was there was a hostage situation, a strange lover or something or another. And so we couldn't go back to the hotel because there was this going on, And I remember somebody yelling across the lawn at the barbecue, "Hey, has anybody heard anything about the hotel?" And some guy kind of leaned back out of his, and he goes, "SWAT team's on site, should be about 20 minutes." And everybody went, "All right," and just went back to what they were doing.
Yeah.
Just it
Yeah.
was just a Tuesday. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that is really accurate, and so you'd be standing there at in Mark's backyard and in his front yard and in the driveway. There's people cooking. It's awesome food. The culinary assault team does an awesome job.
Yeah.
And we might be talking and somebody walks by with an axe, on his shoulder, going to show somebody how to use it. And then
Oh yeah.
to your left, and there's like a professor in psychology who's doing, sword swallowing and spitting fire. And then right next to that guy is an ex-army spook who's been active in 3 wars, talking about how the world actually works to a young and inexperienced guy who's just learning about these things. So it's
Well,
hard to
so
explain.
I took my son who was 15 at the
Yeah,
time, and I told him, I said, "Listen, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen here. Okay, very adult things. You are going to have to take a meter of yourself, and there's things we're not sharing with your mother." And but I remember distinctly, he was standing next to me, and this woman comes up and she's got a kerosene can, and she goes, "Come on, Jackson." And he goes, "What?" And she holds up the can and she goes, "We're going to learn how to blow fire." And he's like, "All right." And I'm like, "Okay, see you later." And she's off teaching him how to blow fire,
Yep.
So yeah, it's a cavalcade of extraordinary martial skills and the sideshow of a carnival, just all
Yeah,
mashed together. Yeah, beautiful event, beautiful event. So anyway, I'm glad
yeah.
that you think I had a good accounting of myself, because I've languished with that pain for so many years now.
Well, the only thing I can offer is next time we meet, we should do it again. I'm getting old and I have arthritis and I have bad knees and stuff like that. So
You shouldn't have
um,
told me those things.
I know
You
that's
shouldn't
why
have told me.
I want to make sure
I
that,
know.
you can
No, I
take
know
me
where I'm
out.
going now. I know where I'm going.
I am getting a PRP shot in my knee, my left knee, in about a month, so it might be
Oh.
fixed by the time we meet up again. Who knows?
Okay, very good. Very good. So that's a long answer, and I hope a colorful one to where we met and
Yeah,
how we came to know each other. Yeah.
and this is one of the things that I also want to point out is that I'm 49, so I've been practicing for 35 years. You've been practicing even longer, and we've seen this whole evolution from pre-internet days to the internet exploding onto the scene
Yeah, oh
to
yeah.
YouTube to all the social media experts that show up, and you're still doing your thing. You're writing books, you're training, you're teaching. I'm doing my thing over on my end, and I kind of feel like we're becoming the old guard now. That people
Oh
look at
yeah,
like,
no, we
yeah,
are.
they
No, there's
used to
no
be
question.
good, but there's young guys now that are so much better, and I'm like, that's fine, that's fine. Just do whatever you want. I'll just be doing my little thing here in Belgium, and you're doing your thing over there, and everybody's having a good time. I don't care. I don't mind. But the point is that um, tying it back into the barbecue is that what I see is nowadays, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong in this, is that with all the social media experts and guys who are good at, really big on YouTube and what have you, nothing wrong with that, obviously. And there's some really great guys out there as well. But there's a bunch of guys that are relatively young. And I remember how arrogant I was when I was young, so I'm not throwing any stones. That I think would, if they would come to the barbecue, they would all of a sudden realize that there was so much stuff that they didn't know. And when you talk to people who actually use this pretty much every day in their professional lives or personal lives, however you want to call that one, it's a little bit different than in the dojo or in the gym or on the mat. It's not the same.
Yeah.
So the quality of instruction, the level of experience that is out there is not the same as when you make a video where you say, well, this is the ultimate punch that will defeat any MMA fighter, or learn the best way to do the guillotine choke. It cannot be defeated. I'm like, okay, I get why people title stuff like that, but I'm like, what I'm missing, I mean, it must have been the same for you when I started training. There was very little information. There were books a little bit and VHS tapes, but there was very little information. And I spent a small fortune buying stuff. I'm guessing you did the same.
Oh yeah.
And now there's this avalanche of information, and there's, I mean, the wheat and the chaff. Trying to find the nuggets of gold in there seems to be good, becoming more difficult than as opposed to becoming easier. Your thoughts?
Well, odd that you should bring this up, because I just actually did a podcast on my Patreon. So stand by, people. Here's the pitch. I have a Patreon page, which is, Patreon, Kris Wilder, and it's called After Hours. And there's 4 episodes that go up a month, and I cover topics that are not covered in the Martial Arts and Life podcast, which is public. And sometimes it's an extension of a topic with a refresh to get you recued, and sometimes it's not. But one of the ones that I just did was informationally obese. That's what we live in. We're informationally obese. And if you take the idea of data and you put it over here, I don't really know what data is. It looks like maybe it's a symbol that's a V with a line through it. And I look at it and I go, oh, maybe that's an ox head. Maybe that's what that's supposed to be. But then I turn the paper over and I move it to information, and now I have context. It's like, oh, that's the letter A. It's the first letter of the alphabet that a lot of us use. So, oh, okay. So it's the letter A. Well, now there's that data, which I don't understand where it came from. I have no context. To information, which is I have a context, which might be the letter A, or it is karate or a martial art. And then, but that major leap is wisdom. And right now, we've got a society that is built around information obesity. It's not about how it's used or how well it's used. It's just, if you can identify something and you understand the context and the content of it, you have all you need. And that's far from it. It's the leap of wisdom that makes the difference. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a car, it was an older car, and I had broken something on the steering column, and I needed to get the wheel off of it, the steering wheel. And so I talked to some guy, oh, you got to get a flywheel puller, you need this, you need that, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I hunted one down. I was going to college. I didn't have enough money. I borrowed one from a guy and it didn't work. And I finally pulled into this garage and this old boy comes out, in overalls and a t-shirt. And he's like, what's that? So I told him what was going on. He says, well, come here. And he said, sit in the car. And he said, grab the wheel. And he goes, I want you to pull back on the wheel. He says, pull back and keep pulling. And I said, okay. and he reached in with a hammer and he went bang and he hit the center of it and it popped off. And I'd spent 4 days trying to get it off of there. And I said, how much do I owe you for that? And he says, how about $1 for knowing how? And, okay. So I gave him $1. You know, that's wisdom. That's just the demonstration of wisdom. That's years of being around mechanics and doing, you know, he may have learned that trick on a wheel on the front end of the car and not the steering wheel, but he was able to, you know, so that's wisdom. And so we're informationally obese. And so what happens is that people have developed a very short attention span. That's what's happened. Our brains are re-engineered now to very short attention spans. The idea of sitting down and reading 10 pages out of a book, what planet are you from? Are you insane? You're going to read 10 pages of a book on paper, let alone? Excuse me, are you from the age of Magellan? You know, I mean, it doesn't fit. Now, it's incumbent on teachers to teach that way, and we'll talk more about that later to address that. But the fact of the matter is that today there's so much information that it is just flat out difficult for somebody to really find a path. And you'll see these martial artists, and I kind of snicker when I hear them say these things. Well, what I did is I studied 7 different systems and I took the best from each system and put it in. No, you might as well go back in time, go in your time machine, go back, find those 7 masters and spit in their faces, because that's what you're doing. You know, you don't understand the wisdom that's built into that assemblage. You're only interested in the information, and more information and more information, and you get that classic analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Because when it's go time, it's go time. I mean, let me ask you this question. You know, you train and you're doing your box, and it sense how, is that right?
Sancho, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you train your drills, you train your movements, and then when it comes time and you're fighting, you don't see the opening, you just take it. You don't see the opening, you take it. Your conscious mind is not involved in the majority of that fight. You know, you're actually just going on your training. You're not, it's rare that you change your behavior, where in the heat of the fight, you'll say, I'm going to weave left and then I'm going to pop back up to the right and I'm going to hit him with a jab. It doesn't work that way. You know, now your corner man may say something different. But fundamentally, you know, you're not going, oh, there's the opening. You're not having that conversation in your mind. You're just taking it because you see it and you go, boom, you know. So information doesn't allow you to do that. Wisdom allows you to do that. Information doesn't. Information slows you down. It spends too much time in your prefrontal cortex. It doesn't spend time back here. It goes, if you think about this, you know, a reflex just goes bang, bang. You see it, it goes into your amygdala, maybe back to your medulla, boom, and you're gone, da-doom. But when you are coming up against a threat that's unknown, you get up in your cortex and you slow the thought process, and it gets you eaten by the bear.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that it's a matter of trying to do all the information processing during training, so you don't have to do it in the heat of the moment, and that you train in such a way that you do all the theoretical parts and the fine tuning and the figuring stuff out and so on in training. and then you ingrain that, and then you train that, so you don't have to do figuring out, while you really need to not take time to think about things because it's going way too fast. And a lot of that stuff is just, and that's, it brings me back to what you just said about the guy I studied 7 systems and I took the best techniques of them. You can't just take a piece of machinery from one tool and just plug it into another and expect it to work perfectly, especially if you take 7 different machines, different tools, and you just strip them and then cobble them back together again. Can it work? Sure, it can work. Is that good engineering? Nope, not at all. So you have to know how the whole thing fits and works together. And this is one of the rants of one of my good friends who is a martial artist, but also a historian. And he knows, a whole lot more about certain cultures, historically speaking, and why martial arts evolved the way they did, and everything that goes with it. Not just what do we think happened then, back in whatever 1500s, blah blah blah, in Japan and so on, but what was it like for people to live there? What were their assumptions and so on, and a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to call him out because I don't know if he wants me to say his name out here, but there's one thing where he showed me, I think it was a wood carving. I'm not sure anymore, and it was like, I want to say 15th century, but I could be wrong because my memory is not as good as it used to be. But it's basically a technique of how a nobleman would basically cut a peasant in the throat a little bit, so it feels like he's about to kill him, and it's just a little bit of blood because he's shaking him down for money. And he says, now we would say that is really, really bad. We don't do that kind of stuff. Back then, things were very different, and people seem to have no understanding of history anymore, and only view history through our modern lens. Whereas then we get to Musashi, Sun Tzu, and so on, where when you read those texts, you have to go back all those centuries and try to figure out how that guy was thinking, what life was like back then, so you can make sense of what he wrote. And then what you do is then interpret it for our modern times. What's the wisdom in there? How's that for a segue?
Well, I had about a 2.5-hour conversation with Blooming one day.
Okay.
It was an event, and everybody went into the bar, and at that point in his life, he didn't drink, and I don't either, so we wound up talking.
And like just going to say, for folks, John Blooming is kind of like a legendary figure. He's a Dutch pioneer of martial arts, judo, karate, trained Masoyama, much stuff. I'll put a link in the show notes for his Wikipedia page. Go ahead, Kris.
Well, which brings me to, I got on the floor with him, and I was, I think I was Shodan in judo. Yeah. And we got on the floor, and I was probably 32 at the time. So he's a good 30 years older than me at the time. I was nothing but a rag doll to that man. Everywhere I went, he was already there with the least amount of motion and everything. But anyway, I was talking, excuse me, hang on just a second.
Go ahead. All right, so Kris is having a coughing fit. I'm going to fill in the time.
Okay, hang on.
Oh, the camera's breaking up a little bit.
Well, we'll fix that.
Okay, well, go ahead in the meantime. Audio is still rolling, so that's the main part.
One of the problems that we've had here recently is we have a lot of forest fires, and so it's causing a little bit of congestion. So I apologize. But I was talking with him, and he was, and this is going to be really harsh, so be prepared. But he grew up under Nazi occupation, and when we got to that part of his life, there was just a chord within him that was non-negotiable, that was virulent, and he was still an angry man when that occupation was brought up. And I had never sat before somebody that for an extended period of time that had experienced such a thing and spoke of it. And that was a moment where, you know, I found more space. It was like, I'm certainly not gonna challenge this guy on this, and I'm certainly not gonna dig. Whatever he's gonna offer, I'm gonna take, but I'm not digging into this thing. And I'm not gonna try to fix or give him a different, I'm just gonna let this be.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to be done. But wow, that was an intense moment. It was really powerful. And it made me walk away with a little bit of a different perspective. Not a negative one, not a bad one, but it was just, it's like, wow, that guy got framed at 6 years of age, and
Yeah.
his world is now seen with this tone.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
yeah, it was, and well, that's it. That was it. It was there. But I just had a fantastic conversation with him. It was awesome, which was insane to me because we're at this big banquet table and everybody goes, oh, the bar's open now. And everybody goes up and gets in the bar and he's sitting over there. I'm like, wait, you rubes, what are you doing? You can drink whiskey anytime. So I just sat down, introduced myself, and we had, like I said, honestly, it was like 2.5 hours of just a very fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
Fascinating guy. I mean,
yeah,
he's lived a full life. I mean, all the stuff he did.
And nothing is candy coated. Nothing.
Oh, no.
He did not candy coat anything. It's like,
no.
I did this. It was wrong, but I did it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
He used to write for a Dutch martial arts magazine called Zendokan, which I used to read. And this is a long time ago. And he would like name names like, this guy is full of nonsense. This is a good guy.
Yeah.
This guy used to train with me. Now he did this. Now I kicked him out. And I mean, he was like straight down the middle. He would come right at you and say to your face whatever he would write or claim. If he said it to anybody else about you, he'd say it to your face. I never met the guy, but I mean, talked a little bit to people who met him. And, you know, I kind of have an empathy for those kind of guys. They tend to lead hard lives, in part because of the way they are, but they also lead full life in part because of the way they are. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, agreed. What were we talking about before I tipped the...
I warned everybody that we were going to go all over the place,
okay,
and it's perfectly fine.
Well, we're doing it.
No, Blooming's an interesting character, and this is kind of what I mean also with I mean, like you said, you know, he grew up in occupied Netherlands. My parents grew up when the Nazis occupied Belgium. My godfather was sent to Dachau, a concentration camp, as a worker. So I have my own perspective on those things. I only had to ask my parents about the war if I wanted to know something.
Right.
It's not that it was like a huge topic of discussion because they were pretty young, but still, it's very different. And this is one of the things that actually worries me about today's day and age, is that we now have had multiple generations that don't know what war is, and they feel very confident rattling the saber and creating a society in which people are basically adults with each other. Balkanization is a term that I like. For the people who don't know what happened in the Balkans, look it up. It's interesting history, and you see the same things happening nowadays all across the world. I mean, not just in the US, it's happening in my country as well. And I'm like, guys, you don't want war. You don't want civil war. You don't want civil unrest. You have no idea what this is like.
You don't.
Talk to people who've lived through it. see how much fun it
Well,
is.
when I become president, which will never happen, but two things are going to happen. We're going to introduce judo as part of the physical curriculum.
Yep.
And then the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a mandatory 10 hours of listening to Dan Carlin. Choose whatever you want. Choose whatever you want, but it's a mandatory 10 hours of listening to Dan Carlin. It's just his latest one that he dropped, which was Supernova
in the East. I just started with it because he takes a while for episodes to drop, so I've waited until this last one to actually start this series, and it's mind-blowingly good.
It is. It's staggering. It's staggering.
Especially if you do Japanese martial arts. So much of what he talks about Japan as a country, as a culture, how it evolved before the war, during, after, and so on, is just something that so many people they don't understand. They don't know. My girlfriend lived in Japan for 3 years.
Oh yeah.
And she still speaks a little bit of Japanese, but she sometimes says stuff like, "Oh yeah, this is like so Japanese." Yeah. And we're like, what do you mean? you have to, Go ahead.
My karate sensei, he grew up in post-war Japan during the U.S. occupation. He was like 5. But his father was not a supporter of the emperor, and it could never be spoken of outside of the house.
Yeah.
It never could be spoken. Just that's mind-boggling to me, to live in that sort of a situation. But he told me all sorts of stories, and I'm not going to go into those because it's just a bunch of wartime stories, childhood memories of growing up under, complete and total surrender. And in case people don't realize, just as a refresher, the Japanese unconditionally surrendered to the American forces, which meant you have no country anymore. We're in charge. And I'll tell you a little story. You go to Hawaii and you can go to the Arizona Memorial, which is a powerful place to be, because there are still sailors entombed in the Arizona where they've built the shrine on top. But then, so you have a little preparation and film, and please be respectful, and you go out there, and you can actually see oil still coming up from the wreckage in some places. And then the tour goes to the Missouri, where the Japanese surrendered, on the deck of the Missouri. I made note that there were many Japanese tourists on the Arizona leg, but when it came to the Missouri leg, they were absent. They weren't there,
Yeah.
So the message is, hey people, civil war, balkanization, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that.
Yes.
Be careful what you choose. Be careful what you choose. And it's the same thing when it comes to martial arts. Really? You're going to lay a beat down on this guy? I've got an acquaintance that just used the Dayashi Burai, swept a guy's foot out from underneath him, hit his head on a concrete stanchion at a gas station, subsequently died, and that guy spent 7 years in prison for it.
Yeah.
It was just a Dayashi Burai. That's all it was. One moment.
Yeah. I just did a violence analysis video on my Patreon today, and just published it. It's in Austin, Texas, which is apparently a happening place, because the nightlife is clearly very, very wild, because I've seen so many videos of street brawls in Austin. Like, I don't know what's going on there. So maybe some of my Texan friends can explain it to me, because I'm Euro trash. I'm a city Belgian, so what the hell do I know? But these guys, I mean, it's clearly this like, yeah, let's take it outside moments, and two guys go at it. one guy gets sucker punched. They start doing this really crappy impression of MMA, going to the ground, rolling around, ground and pound. Other guy gets mounted, half guard, and so on. In the meantime, just as they hit the ground, somebody else gets sucker punched. You see him hit the deck, his head slams into the concrete on the floor. While they're going at it on the ground, somebody else does a jumping stomp kick on one of the guy's heads. That guy gets punched in the face by somebody else. In the meantime, a third guy is raining down blows on the two guys on the ground, and then somebody else does a soccer kick into one of the two guys on the ground's face, and it just goes on and on. And I tell people, like, if you see that kind of stuff, leave. Do not whip out your cell phone. Leave. By leave, I mean you take a head start and you get out of there. A few feet away is not leaving, because this kind of stuff, it moves all over the place. And you might be standing there, and all of a sudden, like a second later, they'll be bowling into you and you end up on the ground injured. Or that guy hits you when he intends to hit somebody else, and you think, well, in self-defense, I'll hit him back. Guess what? The cops show up, and in this video they do, and they just grab the first guy they can get. And if that is you, the last guy they see punching somebody, and you with all your martial arts are doing so awesome, and you're just beating the crap out of this guy, they see you as the aggressor. And like, no, he attacked me. And they're like, that's fine, sir, but you're coming with us.
Well, here's a little clarification that I like to make for people. Police, their job is not to adjudicate, not to sort out what's going on, not to try to find out who's in the right and the wrong. Their job is to arrest the situation, to make whatever's happening stop.
Yep.
That's their job. That's why we have courts. Courts are designed to figure out what happened and if somebody should be punished for their behavior.
Yeah.
Police, that's not their job. They're not interested in who's in the right or who's in the wrong. They're interested in stopping what's going on, because as a society, we have decided that this is the last level. Anything below this is going to get intervened by people that the community pays money to and trains to act as that agent. And shape it this way. Police are actually citizens of the community who have the ability to lawfully kill another citizen. Don't mess with the police. Do what they ask. Be polite. Answer their questions. It'll be okay. Just don't be stupid.
I am pro law enforcement publicly. I've had
100%.
a variety of people come to my Facebook page, disagree with me vocally and less than politely. And I'm like, okay, study the history of policing throughout the ages, throughout the millennia, until you get to modern policing a few hundred years ago, until you get today. You tell me if community policing is better, historically speaking. I want to see that.
No, it's not.
Because
you know why? It's weak. Because it's weak. And we're below that line, and we've got to the place where we're going to have to use authority and force.
Yeah. I've got a Minds channel in which I very much focus on, which is another social media platform, in which I focus on safety and security. And I've been covering a little bit of what's happening in South Africa. And that's where you see a country just basically devolving into chaos. And what happens? Police doesn't show up. The army didn't even show up in the beginning. Mass looting, pillaging, burning. I mean, just on a scale that is crazy. What happened? The locals organized. They're carrying guns, and they're like, we're protecting this mall, because this mall here is the only one left. All the other ones have been looted or burned down. So if this one goes, nobody can go shopping. And that includes that little old woman who needs her medicine from the pharmacy in the shopping mall. Yeah. So we're going to stand guard here, and the police were actually there, a few of them, and they're like, yeah, guys, go ahead, it's fine. So suspension of the Constitution and free for all. And it's like, you want that society? You think you're going to thrive? Good luck with that.
Well, I remember a university professor of mine one time talking about revolution and how, you know, young impressionable people get into college and they start taking social sciences and it's like, we got to change this and I know better and all this kind of stuff. And he said, but here's the test. Always ask them where they see themselves post-revolution, and it's always in some position of authority.
Yeah. And I'm
All
like,
right.
so when you keep studying that history, look up all the instances of the night of the long knives, where they
Oh,
get rid of the
oh,
revolutionaries because we don't want those people around anymore.
no.
And if you think you're going to be the one in power, you know, just pure statistically speaking, there's not going to be that many people who will actually get to retain power. So you're just rolling the dice that you will be so awesomely impressive as a revolutionary that you end up the leader, and everybody else will get killed off. Or are you going to do the killing off?
Well, that's, you know, anybody that wants to study history, go look at Trotsky. That's what
Yeah,
happened to him.
yeah.
You know, he was, you know, a pure believer, and he's a pure dead believer.
Go there. Go to the French Revolution. I mean,
Oh,
it's everything we're
Robespierre.
seeing
Yeah,
now it has been played out so many times before. The names change, the dates change, and the details change, but the mechanics behind it all are the same. Violence, lots of people who don't need to be dead dying. Anyway,
yeah.
okay, I'm going to take it back to a less dark place, Kris, because everybody's going to say that
Okay.
we're two grumpy old men.
But I could talk dark while I smile.
Me too, and that's what people don't get. And it's like this whole joke. Oh, this is horrible. Why are you laughing? Well, because it hurts so much. We're not
There's no
supposed to laugh.
alternative.
True that. All right. 10 Rules of Karate, the immutable
Yeah.
path to victory. If I'm not mistaken, that's your latest book. Okay, talk to me about it.
Okay. Basically, it is just these 10 rules that you should adhere to for your martial arts. Now, we say karate, but I'm going to argue that martial arts in general. And there are things like, you know, that throws thrash, avoid entanglement, presumptive entanglement, him down now. But so like, let's take presumptive entanglement, because this is one of my favorites. And I'm going to go to YouTube. All right. So what happens is that somebody's going to show an application. We call it a bunkai, right? Going to show an application of, you know, this is what you do in this situation. And a couple of things invariably happen. One of them is that the instructor gets into the position for the next, you know, move that's going to do. And then when they demonstrate it, they move quickly, you know. So they get into position, there's a bam, you know, it's like, no, you're not teaching anything. You're just, and then the other thing you have to do is when you finish with your technique, and if the other person is on the ground, you have to turn and walk away like you're walking away from an explosion in a movie, you know, like, yeah, that's what I do, you know. But the presumptive entanglement is the kind of thing where there's a motion. Its origin could be in the instruction to try to get somebody to move the correct way, but it isn't really an application. It's just a way to get them to move correctly, give them a visual stimulation and something to work with. And then it becomes codified and entrenched. And so like you'll see on these videos, you know, somebody throws a punch, and then, you know, that's one of the things we say is one of the rules is punches come in bunches. I just don't throw one punch and then allow you to apply a wrist lock to me and then I fall down. It doesn't happen that way. I throw many punches. Punches come in bunches. There's always another one coming. And so any of these things where, you know, I'm going to grab this wrist and then strike, you know, liver 7, and then I'm going to twist this hand, and it's like, stop. you've lost me. I've moved on. I have no interest in what you're saying, because your principles are false. Your principles are false. They are unacceptable. And that's the presumptive entanglement, that if I get entangled this way, there's an assumption that this other person is going to forget that they have their other arm. I mean, it is tantamount to professional wrestling. You know, it's like, hey, you know, this guy, he's gone completely rigid so that it allows me to hold him over my head for a body bomb. You know, it just, these things don't occur this way. And so presumptive entanglement is one of the big things in there. And the book is very short. There's just, here's the precept, here's some narrative on it, here's some things that you should think about, and then here's an action item for you to take to the floor. And the goal is to try to remove that obfuscation, to get back down to the clarity. We talked about history. You know, martial arts come from a time where there were no sidewalks, no streetlights, no 911, no cell phone. If you got attacked by a highwayman, you were on their turf, because they weren't attacking you unless you were on their turf. And it's bad. You're going to die. You may die. And you're certainly going to lose that little clutch of gold that you've got on your waist that is necessary for your family to make it through the winter. It's about survivability and accountability to your higher responsibilities, as opposed to, I'm going to teach this guy a lesson. Nobody ever got the crap pounded out of them and then got up and said, huh, I'm going to rethink that. They don't know. It's like, next time I'm going to throw more punches. Next time I'm going to bring a knife. Next time, you know, it doesn't, there's no epiphany that happens at that point. There's, you know, the angels do not come down and hit you on the head with a wand, praying, and then you understand. It doesn't work that way. So the book is designed to be really fast, a really fast consumption, so that you can take it to the floor and begin to apply it. And honestly, if you take even presumptive entanglement and you take that to the floor and you put on your presumptive entanglement goggles, you're going to spend the next year trying to resort what you're doing, because you're going to see what doesn't work and what should be done, as opposed to what's done in a laboratory full of golden Labrador retrievers with hip dysplasia because they've been so inbred, you know.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. For me, I get some of the stuff that people do, and some of the stuff that I teach, especially in the Tai Chi Chuan that I teach, is that obviously, you know about the 3 timings, so that people misunderstand that you need this timing for this technique to work. So if you want to do this technique here and you use the wrong timing, it's not going to work. That is not the fault of the technique. That is you misapplying it. You're using it in a way that it is not meant to work. Same thing with distance and angle and all those other factors. But the point is that it's so easy to get stuck in this training mode where everything is baby steps and it's explained to you in a way that is easy to understand and so on and blah, blah, blah. But then right now, so this is the base layer that we start at. Now it's time to move on to, you know, adding a dose of reality to it. Now your partner can attack a little bit faster, now a little bit more strength in there. And now if you don't get out of the way in time, he can actually hit you if he wants to. He's not pulling his punch anymore. And now if you don't act immediately, he will throw that second punch. Like you said, punches come in bunches. So, and if you don't deal with that second punch, he'll give you a third one. And if you end up, you know, in some sort of grappling situations, he will try to throw you. You don't get a do-over. So
No.
you need to see that all these, there are more layers that you have to stack on top of each other when you train than just the basic one, like, I'll just do this punch right here, and then I'm going to do my awesome, whatever style that I do. And like you said, walk away, break the wrist,
Yeah.
walk away, Napoleon
Yeah.
Dynamite.
Yeah. Break the whisk. Well, yeah, I love that. See, who doesn't? Where I learned, where I got my greatest insight into timing was in judo. That was where it became absolutely essential. Without timing, you have nothing. You can muscle stuff, but so what? The other guy might be stronger, you know. But timing, they talk about imbalance and absolutely. But to get good imbalance, to get good kazushi, to get that imbalance, you have to have timing.
Yeah.
And then it was like my mind just blew open, and it was like, oh, timing is everything everywhere.
It
Yeah.
blows my mind that so few people are interested in it. Because this is the second book that Lauren Christensen and I wrote, Timing in the Fighting Arts, and this is the worst selling book that I have. It's like, nobody cares. And I'm like, what do you mean? I would have not literally killed, but I would have paid a large sum of money to have that kind of information when I started, because it would have saved me so much time. Now, granted, today, if we were to write that book again, it would be at least twice as big and have so much more in it, because I learned so much more in the meantime. But I'm like, no timing, no nothing. There's nothing there for you to do. Your technique will not work unless you count on blind luck.
Well, the 80%, the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, only 20% of the people are going to actually pick that book up and read it. It's just because it doesn't resonate with 80% of the population. It just doesn't. And I haven't read that book, but I'm aware of it. I just have to say that, as you're talking about how we're older and, the younger, I look at the younger people, and I look at them, and I remember standing there watching some guys go at it, and my sensei was standing next to me, and he said, "Young rams in the field."
That's a good one.
Yeah. Young rams in the field. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you know what? I don't, we kind of laugh about it, and it kind of seems like we're condescending towards it. No, it is a phase you must go through. You have to pass through this.
Yeah.
If you do not pass through it, you're done. You will stop martial arts.
Yeah. And you don't understand how certain kinds of fights happen and certain kinds of violence happen, because there's, for a lot of people out there, let's call them casual fighters. How about that for a definition? This is what they view is violence. That for them, that's the totality of violence. Is, like you said, young rams in the field, just butting heads and just standing in front of each other, trading punches, blows, and what have you, and trashing around the place. For them, that's fighting. It's not very effective. It's very dangerous to you, the other person, bystanders, and so on. But it happens a lot. So, and if you've never experienced that, it's very difficult to understand that you might fall victim to that too. If you think your superior technique and blah, blah, blah will always carry you through, you have to face some of those guys. I had a student, and now they call it a question mark kick. We do a mawashigeri, but instead of just picking the knee up diagonally, he would pick the knee up straight and then flip his knee all the way down, and his foot would just whack me in the face.
Oh yeah,
because he was too stiff. He couldn't do it. It wasn't the question mark kick. The question mark kick is a valid technique in combat sports and so on, where you feint your opponent into thinking it's one thing and then do something else. No. He just couldn't pick up his leg high enough. So he had to do this really bad impersonation of a correct kick, but it still landed. Didn't hurt me, but it still landed. So it's dealing with, and that's one of many, many examples where when you deal with people who fight that way, they can still knock you out. It's not great, it's not good, but it can still happen. So go through that phase, like you said, and but then evolve. Try to get
But yes,
beyond that as
evolve.
well.
Please evolve. Please evolve, but know that we all have to go through it. And I've been through it and you've been through it.
Yeah,
So, you
yeah.
know, it's just part of it. I very much see the world in a Jungian spectrum. So that's one of the things that he says you have to do. You have to go through that phase.
All right, let's take a hard turn. The Musashi Field Manual, the Sword Saint's
Yeah.
Secrets for Winning the Tests of Life. So could you
Right.
talk a little bit about that book? Because that one's really fascinating to me.
Well, I think I got my copy of the Book of Five Rings about 35 years ago, maybe 40. You know, had to schlep down to the local store and special order it and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I still go back to it. I mean, there's things in there that I still ponder after reading it initially 35 years ago. And I don't want to make it sound like, you know, I got it. But then you shift over to his Dakota, which were the 21 precepts that he wrote down for his students as his life was coming to a close. And they're very they're brief. So if somebody says, "Oh, I got the book Dakota," it's one piece of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the question became, how do we get people to really value what this guy is saying? And so it was, we need to build a structure around this to make people audit this and to say, this is extraordinarily valuable. Like, I think it's precept 19 is be respectful to the gods, but do not count on them.
Yeah.
And I paraphrase. Well, we take that and then we give a little bit of a narrative to it of maybe somebody being foolish with their assumption that some deity is going to intervene on their behalf. And then there starts to ask questions like, when was the time that you did this and you didn't get the result? And it's a journal in a sense. And it asks some very hard questions. One of the things is that we assembled this thing, and it was probably about, I think it was about 3 years of work to get it to where we thought that this was valuable. And Lawrence says to me, I think this is going to be big. And I said, I don't think it's going to. And he said, why? I said, well, because if it's anything that I've learned on social media, it's it better be about me. It better be free, and don't make me work. and this is about Musashi and his understanding of the world.
Yeah.
It's not free, and you're going to have to work. And he kind of went, well, I hope it's a bigger seller, you know. But it is challenging, and in fact, you know, I opened it up today and went to one of the precepts and started answering some of the questions. And I looked at that question and I said, I don't like that question. And it wasn't from a standpoint of an author, like, I don't like that question. It was like, I don't like that question because it's going to make me ask questions of myself that I don't think I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Even better. So at that point, then it was like, okay, I'm going to get right in there, you know, because I'm that kind of guy. It's like, oh, if I recoil from something, I want to know why, and then maybe it does merit some effort. So honestly, it's not for everybody. It's not. The person who has bought the Art of War by Sun Tzu, or bought, you know, the Book of Five Rings and has it on their shelf behind them so that people can see that they've got the book of knowledge behind them, this is not for you. It's just, it's not. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful manner. You're just not, you're going to spend money and you're not going to get any value out of it. If you want to spend the money on it, well, God bless you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But there is an extraordinarily deep level of profundity in that man's words. And I consider him, in some aspects of his life, to be a sociopath. You know, just that's the way that I see him. Now, other people don't see it that way. They have different versions of Musashi, just as we have different versions of everything. It just depends on how you choose to see it. I choose to look at it as a bit of psychopathy in there. And I recommend, I think it's by Kevin Dutton. I think it's called The Wisdom of the Psychopath. I think that's what it's called.
Look that up.
It's an extraordinary book. He did a follow-up to it with Andy McNabb. And Dutton and McNabb were kind enough to autograph a book for me on that. So, but that book talks about how there are sociopaths that have made a conscious choice to be good. And they use that for the betterment of themselves and their surrounding family and friends.
Yeah.
You don't want to be on the outside of it. But you know, so you know, people are, they'll argue, they go, well, you don't understand the context. He was a samurai, it was the time. And it's like, no, I hear you, but understand that at 13 years of age, he had a long going problem with his father. I think he was one of 7 children. I think I may have that incorrect, but somebody will correct me if I've got that wrong. And he basically left home because he was unable to function in the family unit, and lived on the hillside and scraps and all of this kind of stuff. At 13 years of age, he beat a man to death with a stick in the street. That is a capability that might be sociologically thrown upon him, but I have a tendency to think that that's more innate. Now, then, oh, Kris, well, then why did you write this book, the Musashi Field Manual? Because, very frankly, in those 21 precepts is an extraordinary level of wisdom from a man who faced death on a almost weekly basis and had almost a stoic view of life, you know, the Stoics.
That kind of reminds me, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, please.
I quickly read it, and it really, the first thing that popped into my head was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So that for the people who've read that might be a good reference, a frame of reference for them to look at this work by Musashi.
Meditations is in my top 3 books of all time. Yeah, that is an extraordinary piece of writing. And what even makes it more extraordinary is it was never intended to see the light of day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is what I find valuable in the work you do, you know, both Musashi, Sun Tzu, and by showing that throughout the millennia, actually, not just the centuries, but the millennia, people can give you wisdom about the human condition, living on this planet, and so on, that is just as valid today as it was back then. And sure, they might phrase it differently, and they might have, you know, use some antiquated comparisons that are no longer really relevant to us. But that's beyond, you know, that's outside of the message that they're trying to convey. If you focus on that, you're kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So the point is that there is so much really valuable wisdom that is there for people. I mean, just to it's right there in front of you. You just have to read it. It's not copyrighted anymore, those texts, so people can read them. Obviously,
Yeah.
and that's where your book comes in, is that it helps especially young people make sense of the world in a way that, like, well, hey, life's pretty hard sometimes. Here's this guy, this emperor 2,000 years ago, who writes about, what his thoughts, his personal thoughts were. Or you have this medieval samurai who's faced, like you said, death so many times, and that has given him certain insights into life. And there's many more books or writings along these lines. But the point is that it kind of brings us, there's a similar message that you always kind of see in those kind of writings, and it's about overcoming hardship, doing what needs to be done, but at the same time staying human, not turning into the monster as you stare into the abyss, so to speak.
Thank you, Nietzsche.
Yeah. You bring up Jung, so I had to bring up Nietzsche.
Oh, sure. Both of those are deep, difficult. I mean, if you read Zarathustra Speaks, I mean, just, the level of these guys, whether it's Jung or Nietzsche or Aurelius or Musashi, if you are discounting their words that they have given to you, you're a fool. That's all there is to it. You're a fool. Go on your way, please.
Well, I would say that, I mean, especially when it comes to Nietzsche and Jung and so on, you don't have to agree with everything. But that's also not necessary. What you should do is read what is there and try to understand the thought process and try to understand the message that they're trying to bring across to you.
Yeah.
And certain things like living in modern times, obviously, there's not necessarily a need to carry your sword everywhere you go and keep it sharp and spend all that time sharpening it and so on, especially because we have firearms. But maybe you need to maintain your firearm in working condition then. How about that? Which is the exact same lesson, right?
It is. And, there's so many, the depth of what these guys write. And so that's why we made this Musashi Field Manual, is that you just don't read his precept and then go, oh, okay, and walk away. You got to answer some questions.
Yeah.
Like, where was the time that my ego got in the way, and what was the result?
Yeah.
You got to work through that. You actually work through it and you go, ooh, that's tough. One of the things that one of the folks came back who was working on the book, and their response was, they were about 3/4 of the way through, and they said, I'm never going to complain about anything ever again in my life forever. It's like, because what's the point? What's the point? Accept it for what it is, acknowledge it, and then do as you need to do.
Yeah.
A funny story, stoicism, all that kind of stuff. I was working for a guy in an orchard, and a hailstorm came, and the hail hits the fruit, ruins it. It's no longer, you can't sell it anymore because it's bruised, it's dented, it's bitten, it's ruined. And we were standing underneath this covering, just watching this hail destroy the entire crop. And I was angry. And he looked at me and he said, what are you angry about? And I said, look at this, it's all gone, it's all gone. And he goes, yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. And we just stood there quietly and watched it come down. And it finished in 2 or 3 minutes. The crop was destroyed. And he went, okay, I got to go call the insurance agent.
Yeah. So let me share a story with you. I've told it before, so maybe other people have heard me say this one. But so many years ago, after my divorce, I spent my first Christmas alone.
Oh yeah.
I was I was emailing with Lauren. I was probably, I don't remember the email exactly, but I was probably complaining a little bit and whining a little bit. And he writes me back this email. Yeah, I remember this Christmas that I spent in Vietnam during the war, that I slept through a rocket attack because I was so tired from working as an MP. And I'm like, gotcha.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Yeah.
I will stop whining now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was right. He was right.
Yeah.
Now, so I mean, the point.
I I had a friend.
Go ahead.
I was going to tell you, I'm not much for comparing myself, saying, well, people have got it worse.
Yeah.
I'm not much for that. But I was talking to a close friend of mine who had lost his son in a car accident. And we were waiting in the lobby of a Chinese restaurant. This was probably 2 years after his son had died. And, he said, well, other people have it worse. And I said, Marty, I don't know that I subscribe to that idea of other people have it worse. Does that really make it better? And he looked at me and he's just stone cold and he said, yes, sometimes it does.
Hmm.
It wasn't something he leaned into all the time, but it was a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Used. Yeah.
This kind of brings it back full circle to what you said before, that you and Lawrence were talking about, it's not going to sell, or it's going to sell because it's hard and you have to do work. There was this post that I saw on Instagram, and it was about fitness conditioning and so on. Somebody said something along the lines of being out of shape is hard. Getting in shape is hard. Being like, miserable is hard. Being successful is hard. So choose the hard you want to get,
Yeah.
Pick one, because it's going to be hard. And a lot of people like, right on. And then a truckload of people in the comments were like, well, that kind of totally discounts the lived experience of so many people who are living in blah, 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 and they have da, 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 da. And just like, you're totally missing the point. You've like this is the point. And, what's his name? The guy in Guardians of the Galaxy, Drax, the big muscle guy, is like, the point would not go over my head because I'm so fast, I would catch it. You missed it.
Yeah.
You missed it. And I was like, this is, like you said, this is what social media is now, what so many people are on about. That we live in the most hostile to all kinds of life that as we know it, universe. As far as we know, there's only one planet that we can live on, and this planet tries to kill you every second of the day
every
for your
second
entire
of the
life.
day, yeah.
And eventually it succeeds. That's life. Yeah. Don't like it? That's all we've got.
Yeah, you have this. This is what you have. What will you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes. You talk about the. I like to call them the annoying exception seekers. Yeah.
I call them pedantic exception-seeking trolls, pests.
Oh, that's a good one too. That's a good one too.
I made a meme specifically for that, and they always start with, "Well, actually," and then
actually,
the bullshit comes.
Yeah. Actually, there's two tips that I look for. There's one which is actually, and the other one is, so what you're saying is. No, I was very clear about what I said. I was very direct. And then of course you have to say, well, of course, there'll always be exceptions. There's albino alligators. Okay.
Yeah.
But my chances of running into an albino alligator living in the Pacific Northwest is fairly slim. And I'm going to guess yours is too. So.
Okay, Kris, hard turn once again.
Yeah.
This is one that I wanted to talk to you about a little bit. I mean, you've been training you started in 77, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a fair amount of time. I'm closing in on 50. So I've been training for about 35 years. I know what my journey has been like. So could you talk a little bit about, your training now, your teaching now, how has it changed to, let's say, 10, 20, whatever years ago? How have you changed? Do you view the arts differently? Do you train differently? Stuff that you say like, no, I need to keep doing it this way, like I've been doing for decades, or what's it like now for you?
Yes. Uh, well, let's talk about the history of the training just a little bit. That one of the things people do is they'll go, well, like I started in 1977 into Taekwondo with and it's like, I don't care about that. I think it's more important to point to the instructors that you had over the phases of your life and the takeaways that you got from those. My Taekwondo instructor, my first instructor, I didn't realize what I was taking away from him. But what I was taking away from him was that it doesn't make any difference how committed you are to the art. Everyone will make their choice as to their level. That's it. And then you kind of move on and you find, other instructors, that one of my Taekwondo instructors, it was all about kindness. It was all about kindness and making oneself available. And then, you move on to some places where there might be a negative expression that you walk away from and are able to turn into a positive. Building a fiefdom is a bad idea. It's not good because they always execute the emperor. That's what happens. And you can go through there, and I can point to my judo sensei, and it's all about dedication, just one foot in front of the other every day. And so there are these lessons that I think are more significant than when I was at university. I started training in this art and explored that and decided that it fit me, and so I look at it that way, which is not the way I would have looked at things 20 years ago. I would have gone to that resume. I would have gone to that curricula vitae, and laid out all of the times and things. And I don't think that those are particularly important, because a lot of the stuff lies in your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind does not know time.
Yeah.
So, you can go back and you can revisit those lessons and that you took away, and they may not be the lesson that was intentionally taught, but they're the one you took away. And so for that very reason, it has value to you. And so when people say, the arts are personal, that's one way that it becomes very personal. I train differently than I did in the past. Part of it has to do with my physicality. When I was, competing in judo, I was 260 pounds. And, the guys I was fighting were usually taller than me, but close to the same weight. Now I weigh 200 because I don't need that time. I don't spend, when I was doing judo, I had a personal trainer. I was in the gym 3 days a week besides my judo. I had a separate outside trainer. And it was wonderful, man. I'd never moved weights before in my life like that. It was phenomenal. But my body doesn't respond that way anymore. So you'll find me doing, like this morning, I did my Wim Hof breathing, and trained with him one day. But I had been doing his protocols a long time for that. And then the deal is to empty breath, is to maybe do push-ups or to do Hindu squats. And so, finished the breathing this morning and did 51 Hindu squats. Later on, later on today, I'll do some other things. I get up in the mornings and I deliberately get my body moving forward. The first thing I do is I go to the kitchen where I have a warm glass of water with Himalayan sea salt in it. I chug that down, and then I immediately go out the door across the street to the park, and I walk swiftly in the park with my head held high so that I get visual stimulation and forward motion in my body, so that it sets the momentum for the rest of the day. Try not to have coffee until a little later in the morning, usually 2 hours. I structure my workout the same way. I don't like sit-ups. Sit-ups hurt my back, so I do I don't know, we call it angry baby, but it's sort of a bowl sort of movement. I don't do Sanchin in its entirety. I just do part of it, to get my structure and my breathing correct. It's all about incremental improvement right now, as opposed to, large bites. I'm not taking large bites. I'm taking smaller bites, and I'm interested in incremental improvement, and sometimes on some very small items, Like just the other day, I was just working on a muscle in my shoulder. How does this thing work? Way back in here, trapezius, or not trapezius.
Up here, latissimus dorsi.
Yeah. No, this is one of those little buggers in here that gives you a hard time. But it was like, wait a minute now, because I'm in Sanchin, and it creates this structure within my body. It actually is shortening those muscles that go up into the shoulder for stabilization. So what do I need to do to countermand that? So I have to add an extra layer of some sort of stretching or training or whatever it might be to make that work, to get that to stay in a place that's fluid. It has alacrity, and I can move accordingly. So very, very different than it once was. Very different than it once was. I'm more interested in body weight. I still throw the kettlebells around probably 3 days a week, because I like kettlebells. Kettlebells are fun. They make me mad. So if something can elicit that response from me, maybe that's something I should do,
I got a full set here in the attic, which is where my training room is. So I know the feeling. I hate them.
Years ago, the FedEx guy came up with this box, and it was just this box like this, and he's carrying it, and he goes, what? Because it was one pood, it was one full pood, and he's carrying this thing, and he goes, what is this? And I didn't know what to say, and I just, because he's in a hurry and I'm in a hurry, and I went, cannonball. You went, all right.
If you want some more stuff to get angry about, I can recommend resistance bands.
I have a bag of resistance bands. Yeah. There was, I got into some resistance. I think it was a guy by the name of Matt Sui, got me into resistance bands years ago. And I like those too. I think if I were going to encapsulate this, what I'm really interested in is building tensenergy, so that the body stacks and operates correctly. And sometimes that means flexibility. Sometimes it means muscle actuary. So it just depends, but I'm more interested in moving through the world with less effort and being more smooth.
So if I understand you correctly, you just discovered Tai Chi. I'm sorry. I had to. I mean, that was like
here. Look at that! I'm doing it. Yeah. No, you know what? And I got into Tai Chi. I got into Tai Chi, and then I got into Bagua. And the Tai Chi thing, I was playing with it. And it was like, do I want to do Chen or do I want to do Wu? I mean, what's the, I kind of, and that's a good question that people ask. Do I want to do Wei Chi Ru? Do I want to do Xing Yi? What do I want to do? I was fiddling around with it one day, and the head teacher came over and he goes, "What are you doing?" "It's doing some Tai Chi." He goes, "You already know Tai Chi." I said, "I do?" And he goes, "Yeah, just take any of your kata, do them real slow."
Oh, okay. I'm
And I was
going to
like,
call nonsense on this one.
but you know what I did is I started doing that, and what happened out of it is that I got a better sense of my balance and my weight distribution
Oh
and my
yeah,
footing.
yeah,
That's what happened to it. Now, from a combative standpoint and all that kind of stuff, no, I don't think so. But I started, it's like, wait a minute, look what I'm doing. And I think this is a cardinal sin that many karate systems do, is they disassociate their body. I'm going to make a big step, then I'm going to pause, and then I'm going to punch. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just make
yeah.
it all together. Make it all together. Why do you want to disassociate your arm and the mass of your body? And it's like, well, I use a double hitch punch, and it's like, you don't, that's nice to know, but you don't have to do that. Yeah. So,
One of the cardinal rules, one of the principles of doing a good Tai Chi form in the system that I teach and train is everything begins and ends at the same time. So every component of each technique, which will have multiple components that have different ranges of motion, different axes that they rotate around, different levers that will be used, and so on. All these begin and end at the same time. And when you combine that with the other principle, which is continuous movement, because you're not allowed to pause, you have to keep going from beginning to end, the body mechanics become radically different from just doing, and this is me speaking as a non-karate practitioner, but from me talking to karate practitioners and having seen what they do. By definition, a lot of what they do, you cannot do in the same way slow than when you do it at regular speed, by definition.
that is a beautiful point. And now I'm going to irritate, aggravate, and upset a lot of people. The World United Karate tournaments that are done in Okinawa once a year, Sandy Scordo is involved in it. There's a lot of people. Look, I'm going to just tell you right up, it's not karate. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The athleticism and time, it's just no question. I think it's awesome, but it's not karate. Even though they're wearing karate uniforms and belts, it's not karate. Now there's a pile of people that are going to argue that with me, and please feel free. You can find me at Twitter at Kris_Wilder. But my point is that what they're doing is that they're stopping, posing, holding a position to try to get a score, a point. And it's not, and I love what you said, everything begins and starts at the end time, everything finishes at the end time. And I slaughtered that, but I know what you meant. And karate works like you would with a firearm. It says ready, aim, fire. I teach my students fire, aim, ready. Get the movement going, aim it, and then bring everything together. It's a little bit different than what you're saying. And I would say that what I'm saying is probably not as elegant, or quite possibly not as high in the level of principle understanding, but we're on the same path here. And I deeply agree with you that, would you say that again so that I make sure that I got it right? Everything begins
and ends at the same time.
There it is.
That's
Okay.
one of the primary principles of basically the body mechanics that we're trying to learn.
Right.
And the other one is, and this specifically relates to the forms. And the other one is continuous movement. So there's more. there's correctness of stance and so on. There's footwork,
Sure,
there's
sure.
balance turning and stepping. But these two are fundamental, because if you get those two right, that automatically implies, well, if everything begins and ends at the same time, it's about coordination, all right? But it also directly implies that you need to know how many parts are there in each movement, in each technique. You need to discover the parts first before you can actually coordinate them. And that is, and I teach Tai Chi Chuan online. So onlinetaichichuan.com is my website, and it's a membership course in which I teach basically what I teach in class. And I explain that to people in detail in numerous videos. And when I show them, I think they get it. The point is that there are, let's say, at a beginner level, 3 movements you need to coordinate. And at that stage in time, it's kind of like the most difficult thing you can do right now. But it doesn't stop there. Then we add a 4th one and a 5th one and so on. And then we add variations and different ways of connecting all these different components. But they still need to begin and end at the same time. When we say end at the same time, that means that there's an end point. But that seems to be a conflict with the other principle, which is continuous movement. You're not supposed to end anything until the form ends. So we get the yin yang symbol. We get when you can't go any more further. Oh, Kris, the sound is out. I lost your sound. Let me see if I can.
Oh, it's me. There we go.
You're back.
So,
right.
So you see, if you think linear, it's like, okay, there's my stopping point, you know. But if I think in a oval, I just go past the apex.
Yeah.
And you know, and come around to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that is one of the problems in karate, and that's one of the problems that I think that those kata competitions exacerbate, is there's no pause there, there's no stopping, because when you stop, you become like a stagnant pond, and you want to be a flowing river with all of the force of that flowing river, not a stagnant pond. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of pushback on that, even though I agree completely. There is
Take me to the deep end.
No, I can't do it because this is one of those things that I give my word to somebody that I wouldn't talk too much about his training, and I'm going to respect that. But there is something to be said for pauses when it comes to making life and death decisions, which in the firearms training is something you actually learn, right? You don't just do, ooh, there's a threat, unload the whole clip, just reload, start over.
Yeah.
No, there's shoot, no shoot scenarios, and so on. So there's a lot of training going on to making correct decisions in which you actually start engaging into a specific action, and then you need the ability to make a conscious, correct decision, basically in a fraction of a second. And in my opinion, there's no reason why it should be different in traditional martial arts, as if those life and death conditions didn't exist back then, and humans never had an incentive to actually think about, well, do I actually want to kill this person? So that is where I see that a pause could be something that you might want to train in a very, very specifically framed system where it integrates with a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's not what those folks are doing, clearly. So you're right.
Yeah.
I disagree, but you're still right.
Yeah, you make a really good point, Wim. Well done on the exception seeking. No, but I do agree with you. I do agree with you. Yes, absolutely.
All right, Kris. I think we're going to wrap it up for this first part of the podcast. We're going to keep on talking if you still have some breath left. After this.
Let's go to the secret stuff behind the paywall. And by the way, people, if you want to hear it, go check out Wim's Patreon. That's where you're going to get the stuff that's behind the paywall. It's unusual, it's different, and you should go do it.
That is the best promo that I could ever ask anybody to do. So folks, go to winslow.com/65. So the number 65 for all the links. I'll look up everything that we mentioned as far as books and so on goes. There also will be the link to the Patreon episode. Kris, where can people reach you?
There's a great way to do it, and it's called Linktree.
Oh, you're gone again. Kris is trying to get back the sound. I think the internet.
There we go. We're back.
Yeah, you're back. Go ahead. You said there was a great way, and then it cut off.
Yeah, it's called Linktree, and it's linktr.ee/Kris Wilder. Linktree Kris Wilder. And if you go there, it has all of my links. It has everything on there. You can decide what you want to go to, if you want to go to a podcast or you want to go to one of the courses or whatever, and you can just, it's all bundled right there. And it's Linktree. So if you want to do that, it's a great place to find it. But again, you can always find me on Twitter and all of that kind of good stuff too. But Linktree, linktr.ee/Kris Wilder.
All right, good. I'll add that to the show notes. And everybody, I want to thank you for listening, Kris. This was awesome, and I think you stuck to your promise of trying to go all over the place and derail my questions. There's like a truckload of questions that we didn't ask, and I think this is awesome. I very much enjoyed this conversation. We're going to keep it going. Like we just said on Patreon, folks, I want to thank you for listening and check it out next time. Bye-bye.
And thank you to everybody. Nice to have seen you.
Okay. Bye.